We continue now at the top of Daf Chafei Aleph and Meseches Shevuos. This is Shevuos Daf 25a. On the previous Amud, the Gemara had said that the concept of Isser Kolel applies to Shvuah as well. What that means is if that a person makes a Shvuah to prohibit something to himself that's already prohibited, usually that Shvuah would not be Chal. But if within that Shvuah he not only includes that item which is prohibited, but other things which were mutter to him, that's called Kolel, he includes those things as well, so then the Shvuah is Chal. And the Gemara asked on that from a Mishnah in Krisos, which talks about a case where you can eat one item and have multiple karbonos that you have to bring. You have carbon chatases to bring and carbon asham to bring in terms of asham mi'ila. And so the question was, why don't we include that the person also made a shvuah not to eat this item, and he did it through Isser Kolel, he did it through that concept, and so then we can add another violation. Why doesn't the Mishnah list that? It would seem to be that Isser Kolel does not apply by shvuah. And the Gemara was in the middle of Rabbi Zera's answer on the previous summit. Rabbi Zera said that we're only talking about something where if you would do it on purpose, so then there would be kares, but when it comes to shvuah, if you violate that shvuah, there's no kares. It's an Isser Lav over there, so that's why that was not included in that Mishnah in Krisos. But the Gemara asked, when it comes to asham, the asham that's brought from Ila also, if that's done on purpose, there also, that's a lav. Yet that was included in that Mishnah in Krisos, and the Gemara answers to that, bechatas klamrin. And when we say this rule that it has to be a lav, that it has to be kares and not a lav, that's talking about the carbon chatas cases, not that case of the carbon asham, which is brought from Ila. Rashi says, bechatas kamar hada amrinan davar shezedono lav lo katani. That which we're saying that something, if it would be done on purpose, it would just be a lav, that's not listed in that Mishnah in Krisos. Bechatas hu davar, that's by chatas. So Shevuos bitoy chatasi, and a Shevuos bitoy, the punishment, the carbon that is brought is a chatas. But again, since it's zedono lav, since if you did it on purpose, it would be a lav, that's why it's not listed in that Mishnah in Krisos. And the Gemara continues with another answer, again, why Shevuos bitoy is not included in that Mishnah in Krisos. Ravina Amar, Ravina says, ki katani, what is listed in that Mishnah in Krisos? Midi dechayel, midi debar achilu, only things which it takes effect on something which has to do with eating. But Shavuot, when it comes to an oath, dechayel amidi delav bar achilu, that also can take effect on something that you wouldn't necessarily be eating. A person can make all kinds of prohibitions upon himself through Shavuot, so lo katani, so that's not listed in the Mishnah. But the Gemara says, what do you mean? V'harei hektish, what about hektish? That is in that Mishnah in Krisos. Dechayel na'amya itzim v'avonim, the idea of hektish, the concept of hektish can take effect on wood, on stones. It doesn't have to be something that you're going to eat, so that's not a good answer. And so the Gemara instead says, Ella rather, ki katani, what are we listing in that Mishnah in Krisos? Techayil amidi de isba mashash, it has to be something that takes effect on something with substance. But Shavuot, dechayil amidi de lesbe mashasha, an oath, that can even take effect on something with no substance. Kagon she'ishan, for example, a person can take an oath, I'm going to sleep. V'shalo ishan, or an oath that I'm not going to sleep, so lo katani. So that kind of idea, like Shavuot, which can be chal on something that has no substance, is not listed in that Mishnah. Rashi says, the lesbe mashasha she'ishan v'shalo ishan. Person again takes an oath that I'm going to sleep, I'm not going to sleep. Sha'ashena ein ba mashasha. Sleep is not something that has any substance. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Echad devarim shel atzmo v'echad devarim shel acherim, whether we're talking about something relevant to himself or to others, v'echad devarim sheyesh bohen mamish v'echad devarim she'ein bohen mamish, or whether we're talking about things that have substance or things that do not have substance. And Rashi explains, Echad devarim shel acherim, could be things that are relevant to others. As will be explained, the person says, I'm going to give to so-and-so. Or she'ein bohen mamish, or things without substance. Trei gavnei mashma, she'ein bohen mamish. You could have two understandings of what it means not to have substance. Could go in sheina, for example, sleep. Umashma she'ein ben hanor. It could also be something where there's no benefit to the person. Could go in she'ezrok tzror layam. For example, a person takes a shua that I'm going to throw a pebble into the sea. And the point of the Mishnah over here is that all of these things are included within the concept of Shevuos bitoy, that a person can make such a shvuah, and the shvuah can take effect. And again, if the shvuah ends up not being fulfilled, so then a carbon is going to have to be brought, as the Mishnah now continues and explains. Keitzad, how so? Amar shvuah she'etein leish ploni v'shelo etein. Let's say a person says a shvuah, an oath that I'm going to give to so-and-so, or that I'm not going to give, or she'nasati v'shelo nasati, or I gave, or I did not give, or she'ishan v'shelo ishan, or let's say he says I'm going to sleep, or I'm not going to sleep, she'yashanti v'shelo yashanti, or he says that I slept, or that I did not sleep, she'ezrok tzror layam, or that I will throw rather a pebble into the sea, v'shelo ezrok, or that I will not throw it, she'zarakti v'shelo zarakti, or again he says that I threw it, or I have not thrown it. Again, all of these types of Shavuos would be included as Shavuos Bitoy. And the Mishnah continues, Rabbi Shmuel Omer, Rabbi Shmuel says, Eino chayev elo al ha'osid lavo. The only time a person is liable to, in a situation of Shavuot, is if he makes a Shavuot in the future tense. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, lahara o lahetiv. It says a Shavuot that's for the bad or for the good. It's mashma, it implies that it's done in a future tense. Only that is considered to be a Shavuot. Amar lo Rabbi Akiva said to him, Imkain, if so, ainli elo dvarim sheyesh ben hara v'hatava. According to that, if we're following the pasuk, it should only be things that are negatives or positive, like it says lahara o lahetiv. Dvarim she'ein ben hara v'hatava minayin. Where would we know things that are not in the negative or the positive? Amar lo. So he said back to him, meaning Rabbi Yishmael responded, May riboy hakasav. Well, we learned that out from the inclusion of the pasuk. Amar lo. So he said back to him, Im ribo hakasav lakach. Well, if there's an inclusion for that, ribo hakasav lakach, then there should be inclusion for the other as well, meaning there should be inclusion for past tense as well. And Rashi explains, Imkain, if so, the dayak lahara o lahetiv ainli. Again, if you're going to say that lahara o lahetiv means to say that it has to specifically be in the future, so then you should also say it has to specifically be things that are for the bad or for the good. And then the Mishnah said, May riboy hakasav. We can learn it from the inclusion l'chol asher yivate. That's from the pasuk. The pasuk says l'chol asher yivate. The full pasuk is o nefesh kisi shava levate v'svasayim lahara o lahetiv. Those are the words lahara o lahetiv that the Mishnah mentions. L'chol asher yivate ha'adam b'shvua v'nela mimenu. Again, anything that a person will express for a shvua, that's the inclusion. V'hu yada v'ashem lachas meil. And again, he's guilty in terms of this. And the Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Chomer bin Nadarim mi b'Shavuos. There are stringencies when it comes to Nadarim over Shavuos. And Chomer b'Shavuos mi bin Nadarim, there's also stringencies by Shavuos over Nadarim. Chomer bin Nadarim, the stringency by Nadarim is as follows, Shah Nadarim cholim al dvar mitzvah kedvar harashus. Because Nadarim, they can be chal even on a mitzvah, just like on something that's not a mitzvah. Masha ein kein b'Shavuos, that's not true when it comes to a Shavua. And Chomer b'Shavuos, and there's also a stringency by Shavuos, Shah Shavuos cholos al davar she'ein bo mamish kedavar sheyesh bo mamish. A shvua can be chal, can take effect on something that has no substance, just like on something that does have substance. Masha'en kein b'nedarim, and that is not true when it comes to nedarim. And Rashi explains, Hanedarim cholim al dvar mitzvah. Nedarim can take effect by a mitzvah. It could be, for example, as follows: Konim sukkah sha'aniosa. Let's say a person makes a neder. Konim of this sukkah is prohibited. Or lulav sha'aninot. It goes on the lulav. Aser, that actually is going to be prohibited. It will take effect. With an nedar mefarish taima beperak ve'elum mutarin. And the Gemara explains the reason why this works in perak elum ve'elum mutarin. Masha'en kein b'shvuos. That's not true when it comes to shvuos. Kedetanam b'masnisin v'yalef lo l'kaman mikrai, like we learned in the Mishnah, and we're going to learn it out later on from Sukkim. And neder eino chal al hashena. Neder is not going to be able to take effect, let's say, on sleep. Kagon konim sha'ani yoshin. Let's say a person says konim, that I'm going to sleep. To konim lashon hektish, because the word konim is really a language of hektish. V'amai leichel hektish. How can the hektish be chal on sleep? Aval konim einai b'shina chala ayin. But let's say a person would say a konim on my eyes from sleep, so then already it has something to be chal on. It could take effect on the person's eye. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Keitzad Amar Shvua She'etein Leploni V'Shaloetein. How so? What would be an example? An example of a Shvua could be a person takes an oath that I'm going to give to so-and-so, or that I will not give to so-and-so. And the Gemara says, My etein, what exactly is this person saying I'm going to give? What's he giving? Ileimot tzedakah la'ani. If you're going to say that he's giving tzedakah to the poor, Mushba v'omen mehar Sinai, so that's not going to take effect, because he's already under oath from Har Sinai that a person is supposed to give tzedakah. Shenemar nason titein lo, like it says in the pasuk, you have to give to him. Ella, rather, what does it mean? Matana la'asher. What it means is a matana. It means he's going to give a gift to the wealthy. That's not mushba v'omed mehar Sinai. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, She'ishan v'shalo ishan, a person takes a shvua that I will sleep or that I will not sleep. The Gemara says, Ini, is this really true? Does this shvua really take effect? V'yomer Rabbi Yochanan, but Rabbi Yochanan said, Ha'omer shvua shalo ishan gimel yamim. Let's say a person takes a shvua that I'm not going to sleep for 3 days. Malkin, so we give him lashes. V'yashin l'alter, we tell him to go to sleep right away. That is not going to be chal. In that situation, it's essentially a shvuas shav. It's a shvua in vain, because it's impossible not to sleep for 3 days. And the Gemara continues and answers, Hasam over there, Amar Gimel, where he said 3, so there already it's a Shevuos Shav. Hacha de lo Amar Gimel, but over here he didn't say 3, and so therefore the Shevuah is able to take effect. Rashi explains, Malkin oso mishum Shevuos Shav. Again, we give him Malchus because it's a Shevuos Shav. The davar she'efshir, it's something that's impossible. Umishanishba yotzto l'sheka. The moment he takes that oath, it's going to be false. Al malav Shevuos bitoyhu. So you see, it's not a Shevuos bitoy. You see, it's a Shevuos Shav. To katani v'yoshin la'alter, because again, it says that he should go to sleep right away. And again, the Gemara answered, that's if he says for 3 days. But if not, then the Shevuah can still take effect. And the Gemara continues at the 2 dots. The Mishnah said, She'ezrok tzror layam, Mishalo ezrok, another example of Shevuos bitoy, if he says, I'm going to throw a pebble to the sea, or I will not throw a pebble into the sea. And the Gemara says, Itmar, it was stated, the following machlokas amoraim, Shevuah shezarak ploni tzror layam, v'shalo zarak. Let's say the person takes an oath, and the oath is that so-and-so threw a pebble into the sea, or that he did not throw a pebble into the sea, so it's past tense, but it is about somebody else. And so there's a machlokas amoraim. Rav amar chayev. Rav says in such a case, the person is liable. That is an effective shvuah. Ushmuel amar pater. And Shmuel says, no, the person is exempt. Essentially, that is not an effective shvuah. And the Gemara continues and explains, Rav amar chayev. Rav says that the person is liable because isei belav avein, because it's possible to make that shvuah in the negative and in the positive, and so therefore it's an effective shvuah. A person can make the shvuah that so-and-so threw the pebble into the sea, or the negative that so-and-so did not. Ushmuel amar pater, but Shmuel says exempt. Why? Because lesei belahabo, it's impossible to make that shvuah in the future tense. You can't take an oath that so-and-so will throw the pebble into the sea, because you have no control over what that other person is going to do. And therefore, if you cannot make the oath in the future, if you try to make that kind of an oath in the past, it is not going to be effective. And the Gemara says, Lema beplugsa Rabbi Yishmael v'Rabbi Akiva kamiflagi. Let us suggest that this machlokus between Rav and Shmuel, of whether this shvuah takes effect, is the same machlokus that we find between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva. The Tanan, because we learned in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yishmael says, Eino chayev elo al ha'asid lavo. Rabbi Yishmael in our Mishnah said, a person is only liable on a shvuah that's in the future tense. Shenemar lahara o lahetiv, like it says lahara o lahetiv. Amar lo Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva said to Rabbi Yishmael, Imkain, if so, ein li ela dvarim sheyesh ben hara v'atava. Then according to that logic, a shvuah should only be good if it's made for something that's to the negative or the positive, something that's not beneficial or something that's beneficial. Dvarim she'ein bohen hara v'atava, but if it's not for the negative or the positive, minayin, from where do we know that? Amar lo, he said to him, ribo hakasav, we know that from the inclusion of the pasuk. Amar lo, he said to him, ribo hakasav lakach, well, if there's an inclusion for that, ribo hakasav lakach, then there should be an inclusion for your case as well. And the Gemara continues and suggests, Rav Diamar Rabbi Akiva. Let us say that Rav follows Rabbi Akiva. Again, Rabbi Akiva says that a shvuah does not need to be in the future tense. And Rav is saying over here that shvuah shezorak ploni, which is in the past tense, is a good shvuah. Ushmuel Diamar Rabbi Yishmael, and we can say that Shmuel holds like Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yishmael says that a shvuah needs to be in the future tense. And Shmuel over here is saying that this shvuah in the past tense is no good. And the Gemara continues and says, Ali with Rabbi Yishmael kuli alma lo pligi. According to Rabbi Yishmael, there certainly is no machlokas. What the Gemara means to say is that Rabbi Yishmael certainly would say in this case that the person is exempt because he holds every shvuah has to be in the future. As the Gemara now explains, Hashta milsa di isa belahaba. Now Rabbi Yishmael is saying that something which in theory you could do it in the future tense, but lo mechayev ala Rabbi Yishmael l'shavar, but that's not enough to say that if it's done in the past tense that you'd be liable according to Rabbi Yishmael. So milsa de lesa belahaba, if something that's impossible to make this shvuah in the future tense, like in this case you cannot make a shvuah that so-and-so will throw a pebble into the sea. So mi boisa, would we even need to say it? Of course, in this situation, Rabbi Yishmael would say that it's not a good shvuah. But ki pligi aliba de Rabbi Akiva, the whole machlokas between Rav and Shmuel is only within Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says that a shvuah does not need to be in the future tense, but does it at least need to theoretically be able to be made in the future tense. So Rav Rabbi Akiva, Rav holds like Rabbi Akiva, and therefore again Rav will say over here that it's in the past tense, and that's perfectly fine. Shmuel Amar, and Shmuel says, Ad kan lo mechayev Rabbi Akiva hasam. Rabbi Akiva only says liable l'sha'avar. He only says liable in a case where it's made in the past tense. Elamilsa di isa bilhaba. At least with something where in theory it's possible to make it in the future tense. So mechayev Rabbi Akiva l'sha'avar. So then Rabbi Akiva says chayev in the past tense. Aval midi de lese bilhaba. But if it's impossible to make it in the future tense, lo no, then we would say again that it would not be a good shvuah. That's what Shmuel will argue. Shmuel will say that Rabbi Akiva can even argue with me. And the Gemara continues and says, Lema beplugsa, let us suggest that this is the same machlokas, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Chof Hey Amud Beis.